Hello, welcome back to IM Movies. The movie begins with Richard playing football with his team. Things take a dark turn when a player from the rival team violently attacks him, causing Richard to lose control and retaliate angrily. His outburst terrifies those around him. In the next scene, Richard is seen with his girlfriend, Lisa. Their intimacy triggers an unexpected transformation in Richard, turning him into a ferocious werewolf. He attempts to harm Lisa, who manages to escape in fear. The following morning, Richard awakens to the horrifying realization that he has unintentionally killed his own parents during his werewolf rampage. Overwhelmed by guilt and sadness, Richard transforms into a werewolf once more. Concerned for Richard's well-being, Lisa arrives at his home with the police. Richard flees the scene, and news of his alleged crime spreads like wildfire. The community believes Richard is a dangerous threat who murdered his own parents. With the police now actively searching for him, it becomes clear that Richard can't control his transformations, which occur during full moon nights, turning him into a deadly werewolf. Richard is deeply shaken to discover that he has been adopted by his parents he unknowingly harmed. This revelation leaves him feeling incredibly uncomfortable, as he had never even considered the possibility. As Richard continues on his journey, he witnesses a distressing scene. Two boys are attacking a girl on the street. The girl pleads for Richard's help, but the boys ignore his warnings and demand that he back off. Fueled by anger, Richard undergoes another transformation into a werewolf and tragically kills both of the boys. The girl, terrified by what she's witnessed, flees the scene. Seeking solace and perhaps answers, Richard heads to a bar where he encounters a man named Wild Joe. It turns out that Joe is not an ordinary man. He's also a werewolf. This revelation shocks Richard even further, as he now understands that he is not the only one with this condition. However, Richard is struggling to control himself, and he implores Joe to help him. Joe responds with a question asking, "Didn't your parents teach you how to control it?" Richard discloses that he is an adopted child and has never known his biological parents. This revelation reinforces the idea that there are others like him out there. Desperate for guidance, Richard asks Joe for his real address, but Joe refuses to share it. Instead, he provides a cryptic clue, hinting at a place where Richard might find answers. With this new lead, Richard embarks on a journey to a distant town. Upon arriving in the town, he enters a local bar, only to be met with curious and suspicious stares from the townspeople. His quest for understanding and control over his werewolf transformations has led him down an increasingly mysterious and perilous path. After Richard enters the bar and orders a drink from the bar owner, Angelina, he finds himself drawn towards her. He begins a conversation with Angelina and inquires about the possibility of working there. As he talks to Angelina, a young man enters the bar and starts displaying rude behavior towards Richard. Despite the provocation, Richard chooses to remain calm and refrains from causing a scene inside the bar. Instead, he decides to confront the young man outside. Once all the other customers in the bar have left, Richard seizes the opportunity and confronts the young man, who is now alone. The young man becomes frightened and quickly flees from the scene. Shortly after, a man named John approaches Richard and offers him a job as a farm worker on his farm. Richard accepts the offer, and John accompanies him to his home. However, their encounter is interrupted by the arrival of another man named Connor. Connor accuses Richard of beating one of his men. John intervenes, asserting that the incident at the bar was not Richard's fault, and mentions that Connor is his nephew. With this revelation, it becomes clear that Connor's men were the ones who had caused trouble in the bar. Connor reluctantly accepts this explanation and leaves the place. The next day, Richard makes a disturbing discovery: the lifeless body of a wolf. John informs him that this wolf had been killed by someone who hunted it without any apparent reason. As Richard heads towards a bar, he encounters a young boy who claims to be his second cousin. The boy warns him to stay away from Connor. However, Connor is watching from a distance, and upon hearing this conversation, the boy flees. Unfortunately, Connor's men catch up with the boy and interrogate him about the information he shared with Richard. The boy admits that he advised Richard to leave town and stay away from Angelina. Connor presses further, suspecting that the boy may have mentioned something about him as well, as he heard his name during the conversation. Ultimately, Connor lets the boy go but threatens him, warning that he'd better run away, or else they will pursue him. Afterward, Connor and his men head into the forest following the boy. Richard overhears their pursuit and decides to follow them into the woods. In the forest, Richard unexpectedly encounters Angelina, who informs him that Connor and his men are on the hunt for the boy. As Richard watches in horror, he sees Connor's men devouring the boy they had been chasing, behaving like savage animals. Disturbed by the gruesome scene, he retreats to Angelina's house. Inside, he continues to watch the news, but his attention is soon drawn to a heartwarming sight. John's wife embraces him upon his return, leaving Richard astonished. John then reveals a shocking and painful truth to Richard. He explains that Richard's mother was the daughter of his sister, making her a purebred. Connor had desired to marry her, but when she refused his proposal, Connor seduced her. This revelation means that Connor is Richard's biological father. John goes on to explain that Richard's grandfather had falsely spread the news of his mother's death and had locked her away to prevent Connor from getting near her. When Richards was born, they gave him away to someone else, which ultimately led to his mother's suicide that same month. Connor became more dangerous after his mother's death, biting and transforming more people into werewolves, forming a pack of them. However, these werewolves were weaker than purebreds like Richard. It becomes clear that Connor now seeks a purebred girl, like Angelina, to end his malevolent actions. Angelina tries to explain to Richard that surrendering to Connor might be the only way to stop him from harming others, as she herself is willing to do. Richard struggles with the weight of his own actions and admits that they are all like animals, recounting how he unintentionally killed his own parents. Angelina then shares her own tragic story, revealing that her father, in a drunken rage, took her mother's life. When he woke up the next morning and realized what he had done, he took his own life in despair. Richard and Angelina continue their intense conversation about the power and curse of being a werewolf. Angelina believes that it can be a blessing if they can gain control over it. Richard expresses concern for Angelina's safety and asks her to stay away from him to prevent any harm. However, Angelina refuses his request, showing her determination to face the situation together. That night, a pack of purebred werewolves assembles at John's house, all in agreement that Angelina should be given to Connor. Richard opposes this plan and decides to confront Connor alone. He approaches Connor and reveals that he is the son of the woman Connor had seduced. Connor offers Richard a chance to escape, but Richard refuses, prompting Connor to become aggressive. He sends his men after Richard, and Richard fights back, killing all of them as he reaches the forest. However, Connor and his remaining men surround Richard and brutally beat him. Richard cries out in pain, prompting Angelina to rush to the forest upon hearing his shouts. As Connor advances toward Richard, Richard retaliates with his claws, causing Connor to flee. Richard continues moving forward, but suddenly encounters a deep ditch. With no other option, Richard jumps into the ditch, sustaining severe injuries in the process. Encouraged by the presence of Wild Joe, Richard manages to stand up despite his severe injuries. With great effort, he makes his way back to the forest where he encounters Angelina. She helps him get back home, where John urges Richard to stand up, as it is the only way for him to recover. Richard, however, remains unable to get up on his own. John signals to Angelina, and she approaches Richard. Her presence seems to have a positive effect on him, as there is a noticeable change in his body movements, and he starts to show signs of recovery. Angelina then helps Richard to his feet and encourages him to run away. At first, Richard hesitates, but he summons the courage to start running. Miraculously, as he runs, all his wounds begin to heal. Eventually, Richard and Angelina return to John. It becomes apparent that John possesses a stockpile of explosives. Richards comes up with an idea to create bullets that could be used to combat the werewolves. While Richards is setting up explosive material under the earth, he suddenly hears Angelina's voice. Hurrying back home, he discovers that Connor and his men have captured both John and Angelina. They summon Richards to their location and have chained Angelina as a prisoner. In a desperate bid to rescue Angelina, Richard swiftly eliminates the guard, and in the process, he fully transforms into a powerful werewolf. Connor's men attempt to subdue him, but Richards fights back and takes them down one by one. After freeing Angelina from her restraints, Richards makes a run for the woods. Angelina joins the fray, exacting her revenge by eliminating all of Connor's men at the scene. Meanwhile, John is freed from his cage, and he is sent on a mission to locate and rescue Richard. Back at home, they anxiously wait for Richards to return. Connor's men, however, close in on their location. Connor demands that they retreat, but when John starts firing, many of Connor's men are fatally wounded. Amidst the chaos, Connor hears Richard's distinctive howl coming from the direction of the farmhouse, setting the stage for a final confrontation between Richard and his father, Connor. As Connor and his men reach the farmhouse, Richards quickly locks the door, trapping them inside. John begins firing, leading to a massive explosion that ends the lives of all of Connor's remaining men. However, Connor survives and launches an attack on Richard. The two engage in a fierce battle, and Richards manages to overpower and subdue his father. But when John aims his gun at Connor, Richards stops him, reminding Connor of the wrongs he has committed. Connor then reveals a heart-wrenching truth. He claims that he never mistreated Richard's mother. In fact, they were deeply in love. When Richard's grandfather spread the false news of her death, it shattered Connor. He had cherished Richard's mother, and her loss had driven him to commit terrible acts, turning him into an evil man. Just then, Wild Joe, the man Richards had met in a local club and who had a vendetta against Connor, arrives at the scene. He explains that he had always wanted to take revenge on Connor, but was banished from doing so. However, he found an opportunity when his brother informed him about Richard. Joe admits to being the one who killed Richard's parents, spreading the false news that Richards had committed the act. This forced Richards to leave his native country and come to this town. Richards becomes consumed by anger and attacks Wild Joe. In retaliation, Joe strikes Richard, causing him to fall to the ground. When Connor attempts to prevent Joe from harming Richard, Joe brutally cuts Connor's throat, leading to his immediate demise. Now Joe turns his murderous intentions toward Richard. However, just in the nick of time, Richard's uncle, John, intervenes and rescues him. Joe attempts to flee, but Richards manages to stop him. As Joe takes a smoke break, Richards grabs his cigarette and throws it onto the ground, igniting the spread of explosive materials around them. Richards quickly retreats to a safe distance, leaving Joe with no escape. The explosives detonate, resulting in Wild Joe's demise. In the next scene, Richards and Angelina are seen leaving the town together. John provides them with a list of the last remaining purebred werewolves, individuals who shared their unique condition. The movie ends with Richards and Angelina departing the town, symbolizing their fresh start and the end of the terror caused by the purebred werewolves. Thank you for supporting my small channel. Please like and share this video to help this channel out. Thanks for watching and see you at the next one.